well. Congressman Swalwell, good to see you, sir. Let me ask, it sounds like you guys are done with this phase. Is that a fair deduction, or have you guys not made this decision yet?
We're done for the day, probably for the week. We're still going to continue our investigation, but there are no public hearings scheduled as of yet.
What more witnesses? Let me ask you this. It doesn't sound like there's an appetite. Our own reporting says there's not a huge appetite to see more witnesses, whether it's to pursue, to go further, try to get John Bolton, or to pursue, to try to figure out what the energy deal was at Giuliani and Perry and all of that business. Is that correct, reporting that there's not an appetite for that on the committee?
Well, there's not an appetite by the president to cooperate, Chuck. So if the president is going to block Secretaries Pompeo and Perry and Mick Mulvaney and John Bolton from coming forward, we think we already have powerful evidence of high crimes and misdemeanors to include extortion, abuse of power, obstruction of Congress and justice, and also the impeachable offense of bribery. And we think the only relevancy to those witnesses at this point is the fact that the president won't let them come in, because if they could help him at all, you could be assured he would allow them to come in.
Do you believe, look, the facts are one thing, and we live in a political environment. You have enough evidence. It sounds like, and I get where you're coming from. You have enough evidence to back up those charges. But it's not a court of law. If you're trying to make the political case, you probably need more Republicans to turn on the president or to flip on the president. How much effort do you think needs to be made on your side of things to make that political case?
These facts will stand the test of time. The question now is, will they stand the test of courage by Republicans? Because the evidence is overwhelming. They're not really in dispute at all, Chuck. I think it's really a matter of, is this what we want to turn over to our children? A democracy where a president can leverage the power of the office to invite a foreign government to cheat an election. And so it's really, will my Republican colleagues use their eyes and their ears to listen to and hear from their constituents?
Did it disappoint you that you couldn't even convince Will Hurd? Will Hurd basically said he hadn't seen anything impeachable. One could argue he was probably the most open-minded Republican on that panel. That's not an insignificant development, no, politically.
Well, that's something that, he's going to have to deal with as far as his conscience, his constituents, and his interpretation of the Constitution. And, I'll wait for, any vote if it comes to that. But the evidence is, I think, overwhelming, Chuck.
Is there any thread here that you wish you would continue to pursue that you fear you may not?
I wish the president would cooperate. And your last guest, Andrew Weissmann, an experienced prosecutor, I promise you almost every investigation he's been a part of was very much document driven, looking at text messages, emails, financial records. Here is probably the biggest investigation ever in America that has been witness driven. We have not had the documents from the State Department, from the White House, but we've had courageous people come forward and defy the president's lawless orders, and that has aided us tremendously. I promise you, Chuck, if we could just pick 10 documents, our top 10 documents to get from the White House and the State Department, this case would be done, and the president, I think, would, probably have no defense at all.
Is there let me ask you this, how long should you fight for that in court? You got the Don McGahn court fight. You might get a ruling on Monday, and maybe that opens the door to Bolton and some others. We don't know that ruling. We'll see what happens. But do you think, the New York Times editorial was sort of warning the Intel Committee, don't rush this. Don't look like you're trying to hurry up and get to the Senate trial, or hurry up. How long should you have that court fight to try to get those documents?
Chuck, the balance here, and it's a very fair question, is the integrity of the ballot box and the court process. Because the president, in that call with the president of Ukraine, invoked an upcoming election and his political opponent, we have to make sure the upcoming election is pure and free from outside interference. And so if the president is just going to go to court, this could take 9 to 12 months, and we could lose our democracy. So we don't have we don't have time on our side here. We have the urgency of an upcoming election and a president who is testing our democracy.
Very quickly, John Bolton, how hard are you guys going to fight to get him to testify?
Look, 3 of John Bolton's deputies came in. They had the courage to provide truthful testimony, defy the president's lawless orders. If Mr. Bolton doesn't want to come in and focus more on writing his book, history will judge him for that. But it will also judge that the president had a consciousness of guilt and told him not to come in.
Congressman Eric Swalwell, Democrat from California. Appreciate you coming on and sharing your views, sir.
Thanks, Chuck. My pleasure.
Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Beat the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.